Today, the series of protests in Hong Kong have really escalated, and the communists, right, the communists in Beijing are now panicking, and they're doing their best. They're trying to do their best in order to quell this rebellion by millennials, old people in Hong Kong who would like to reclaim their own sovereignty, their freedom, their independence from the hands of the communists, the draconian totalitarian communists in China. And we've seen that they were able to enter or barge into one of the most busiest airports in the world in Hong Kong, and that really escalated. And the Chinese were now using tear gas and violence in order to stop and quell the ongoing protests that could probably liberate these Hong Kongers. So one thing that I noticed is that the media, the so-called intellectuals, have really missed one big point when it comes to analyzing what really is motivating or inciting the Hong Kongers into protesting against the draconian power of China. And they said that this is about this extradition bill, etc. But this is just actually the trigger. Okay, there must be a trigger in order to wake the people in Hong Kong up into fighting for their freedom. And they're saying this is enough. Okay, we're fed up, and they would like to, again, like I said, achieve freedom like other people all over the world have been enjoying today. Today is the era of freedom. So what these intellectuals missed is that this is actually a fight between globalism and nationalism. So and Donald Trump really played a big role, and he's playing a big role in promoting the ideal and the principles of nationhood, of nationalism. And before, I was skeptical to use the word nationalism, but Trump was able to use this word, this term, without any shame at all. Okay, and that's what I like about him. He's so politically incorrect, and he's not afraid to say it. One of the most I must say, one of the most notorious words that we can use in Asia, because most leftists in Asia are actually nationalists. Okay, and this ongoing protest in Hong Kong is not really about this a protest against the draconian extradition bill that China is trying to push into the throats of the Hong Kongers, but this is actually about nationalism. And Trump, like I said, has played a big role in promoting this idea of nationalism across the world, because like we've seen in Great Britain, the Brexit movement. That's probably the reason why Boris Johnson became the prime minister, because the weak and demented Theresa May did nothing to really push for the promise of Brexit. And we're now seeing this nationalistic movement in Italy and other parts of the Euro world. So in China or in Asia, these colonies, let's call them colonies, because Taiwan and Hong Kong are basically colonies of the Chinese Empire. And why did I say this is all about nationalism? Because according to this news, this British colony for more than 150 years has started to feel like it can rule its own fate, can stand on its own feet. Definitely, Hong Kong is one of the freest economies in Asia. Because of its economic freedom, it's one of the most prosperous, yeah, and wealthiest nations on earth. And let me just show you this survey in a university in Hong Kong, in which most Hong Kongers or people in Hong Kong are actually identifying what's going on here. Okay, let me just stop all this. Okay, they're playing right now. Okay, let me just show you this survey. Okay, surveys from the University of Hong Kong show that most people in Hong Kong identify themselves as Hong Kongers. Only 11% would call themselves Chinese, and 71% of people say they don't feel proud about being Chinese citizens. Of course, why would you feel proud of being a Chinese citizen when people in China don't have the freedom that they enjoy in Hong Kong? Okay, the only reason why China is forced to provide this type of freedom to Hong Kongers is because of its agreement with the British, before the turnover of Hong Kong back to China, after the term or before the end of the term of Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. So Hong Kong can definitely become a one nation, okay, an independent sovereign nation, just like Singapore. This is actually something that people in the West don't understand because, well, if Hong Kongers identify themselves as Hong Kongers, we have woke millennials, liberal millennials in the United States who identify themselves as black, okay, Hispanic, gorilla, whatever that is that they would like to identify themselves as. Some identify themselves as Asian. So notice that they identify themselves as minorities, as weak, as victims. America, for example, has presidential candidates identifying themselves as colored people. For example, Beto O'Rourke, a white Irishman, is identifying himself as a moron. No, he's identifying himself as Hispanic. And remember his speech during the debate, he was speaking in tongue or in Hispanic. And we have Elizabeth Warren as well, who identified himself or probably continues to identify herself as a Native American. So this is how stupid and unhinged Democrats in the United States are. So one thing that I would like to show you is the how the Chinese authorities are trying to blame the United States for the ongoing protests on Hong Kong. So we have this Chinese ambassador to the U.S. Who blames ill-intentioned external forces. And when they use external forces, they actually mean the United States. And this is why I would like to get to this point in which we have all these photos, by the way, percolating on social media, showing Hong Kong protesters displaying placards about President Donald Trump. They're pleading for the president of the United States to help them. So we have, for example, this poster, President Trump, please liberate Hong Kong. So they're asking for the help of Donald Trump and other leaders of the G20 nations to help them. So they would like to be liberated. And that's what I really like about the United States, because the Americans have this First Amendment and Second Amendment rights. Okay, and they take that for granted. The really bad thing about American liberals is that they have this switch from the 1960s, way back in 1960s. The liberals were actually for free speech. The liberals, for example, in UC Berkeley, they were for free speech. Okay, and it really reminds me of the leftists in Asia. For example, in Philippines, the leftists in Philippines are actually for free speech. They are always for freedom. They've been chanting freedom whenever they try to protest American imperialism or the incumbent regime. For example, during this time, the presidency of Duterte. So they're always for freedom. But now that the liberals have already controlled or dominated the megaphones of culture via political correctness, okay, through the imprimatur of political correctness, now they would like to ban free speech. They would like to ban free speech and introduce this idea, this draconian anti-concept idea of hate speech. And yeah, that's actually the hypocrisy. That shows the hypocrisy of leftists. Once they achieve power, do not trust them to keep freedom. Once they have the power, like they are now having in China, they're gonna quell that very freedom that brought them there. Okay, and that's the history of American liberalism, neoliberalism, in the West, and not only in the West but in the European countries, and they are basically destroying themselves. So now let's get to the widening influence, the creeping invasion of China all over Asia. So we've seen all this. Let me just show you the ongoing trend on Twitter, for example. Okay, we have this ongoing trend on Twitter about China. So there is a Hong Kong protest. It's now actually making trends on Twitter. And if you're gonna, okay, Taiwan is now the ongoing trend on Twitter. I don't usually trust Twitter because most Twitter users are actually liberals and left leaning. So now we have Taiwan trending. Okay, Taiwan is actually wanting to be liberated from China. Okay, just like Hong Kong, and unknown to the Western leftists who are too much preoccupied and obsessed with gender issues, genderism, about all of this white liberal manufactured problem, as we call them, the first world problem, about gender, about minorities, about racism that they've been inventing ever since Trump has been elected president in 2016. In Asia, we have a China problem. Yes, the Chinese has this nine dash line. If you're aware of the politics in Asia, the geopolitics in Asia, they have this nine dash line that is trying to incorporate the oceans in what we call the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, as we Filipinos would like to call it. And China would like to reclaim all this, ocean territories in order to dominate, economic activities in naval power in Asia, and that's what they're trying to do. And that's why I would like to tell you that I'm really really upset when people in America, for example, the liberals in America. Don't have an idea what freedom is all about. They don't have an idea of what freedom is all about. Freedom is actually what the young people, the young protesters in Hong Kong are clamoring for. This is what they're protesting for. And the woke millennials in the West, they don't have any fucking idea what freedom is all about. All they know is their privilege, identity. They actually feel white guilt, the liberal white guilt. That's the reason why they're chanting all this racism, Trump, orange man bad, whatever that means, because they don't have any idea of what a real crisis is all about. And the real crisis is actually what's going now in Asia. The crisis created by China, the crisis in Hong Kong, and going back to the topic of nationalism, it's all about nationalism. Hong Kong and Taiwan would like to be liberated from China. And Mahathir Mohamad was right in warning the Philippines, because the Philippines, okay, I would like to really point out this myth that Duterte is actually a good leader. He's not actually a good leader. He's actually a stupid leader because he's so stupid that he tried to align himself with China, and now the Philippines is now um, trapped in this Chinese debt. Okay, billions of dollars in Chinese debt. And when Mahathir Mohamad, for example, visited the Philippines, he said, "Be wary of the Chinese debt," because he knew personally what this is all about. And the Chinese debt is actually about expanding power in Asia. It's all about making the Philippines surrender its claim to the Spratlys Islands. Okay, this is what's going on right now. So this is the news about Mahathir Mohamad warning the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte of the China debt trap. Okay, he knows Mahathir Mohamad is a man of wisdom. He's like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. So I think I've been rambling about all of these issues. It's actually not just about Hong Kong. It's actually about the countries in Asia as a whole. The countries in Asia that are being invaded by China. For example, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and Vietnam. They are all mad at China having this creeping invasion and was trying to dominate these naval territories in Asia, what they call the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. But this is what we have for today, and just giving an idea of what's going on in Asia. Okay, the ongoing crisis again in Hong Kong is about the clash between globalism and nationalism. And this is again Vincent, and have a great one.